have one coming up. I'm like, I've got 500 million. Is everybody else?
We will call this meeting to order,
Thanks.
and we'll start off with the roll call, please.
LeBlanc, Denham,
Here.
Fenton, McConnell,
Here.
Meenan, Yancey,
Here.
Milton,
Here.
Westfall. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And our first agenda item, we'll start off with approval of the Finance Committee minutes for the March 24th regular meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. And then we'll get a Finance Committee overview from Jan.
I'll get this thing right to get started. So the one thing I wanted to do, obviously I was expecting new members so I could be able to walk through this and kind of outline what some of the expectations are and things like that. What I did in putting together this presentation, I just put together what we have in city code. What is the function of the Finance Committee? To review the operations of the budget, to go through procedures, various kinds of procedures, and things like that. Over the years, we've kind of morphed into various different things, but we haven't turned around and codified those in city code. So those are the things that my recommendation is going to be. If we're going to expand the responsibilities and duties of this committee, we should put it in here. We shouldn't just say, let's wing it. I think we'll find that in the past couple of years, we've gone through some various things in different departments where we've made some moves and not brought it to the board for approval. And so there's things that the board doesn't know about or they wouldn't expect and things like that. So I would want to be able to have whatever it is we're going to be doing, have it codified so the board understands what it expects from this committee and the committee can understand its responsibilities.
Thank you for doing that, Jan.
We focus a lot on, we bring individual items to this committee for approval, things that are within the department's budgets and things like that. I get that whenever we're going through the capital process and the budgeting process, but if we've already got it in our budget and things like that and it's already been approved, why are we revisiting this? Those are things that obviously, from my perspective, I've got questions for my department. Why do we do these things? So I'd like us, if this is something that we want to continue to do, let's fix it here.
Very nice.
Okay. I want to kind of point out the roles and responsibilities of the department itself. And obviously, we are minus a finance director at this point. I haven't done this kind of work for going on 8 years, a little over 8 years, and it's pretty obvious. You can tell it. So the finance director shall be the head of the department and serve as the city treasurer. That's somebody who's over all the budgeting process, all the individual processes of accounts payable, accounts receivable, all those functions that help the city maintain its financial stability. But I also want to point out that the city clerk is the general accountant for the city. The city clerk is the one who reports the financial status through the board minutes and board reports and things like that. She is the one, or that role is the one that's responsible for that. It's not only in city code, but it's in state statute. Among other things, the city clerk shall keep a journal of the proceedings of the board of aldermen and shall be the general accountant for the city. So I just want to make sure we understand those distinctions. The treasurer maintains the processes. The accountant is the one who is accountable for it, reports this information. So that's the one thing that's very, I want to make sure we understand.
And Jan, in saying that, that's something that we haven't been practicing, right? Our city clerk has not been looked at or viewed at as our general accountant of the city.
Right.
So that's a new change that,
Well, it's really resetting it back to what the code says and what the state statute
yeah,
says.
so that's what I meant. We haven't been doing it, but we're now going to reset it back to the way it should be.
And I'll talk more about that later whenever we're bringing in an outside firm and things like that to get us, help us through this process. But we need to be able to have an understanding of what the expectations are going to be.
Speaking of new firm, would you give everybody an update of where we are with filling that role, please?
What I've done is I've contacted a firm. I've contacted multiple firms, but the one we found that kind of fit our needs the best is a firm called Baker Tilly. The idea behind that is we want to have that firm come in and do essentially 3 different functions. We want them to act as an interim director, if you will. Now, this isn't going to be somebody that's going to be boots on the ground all the time. So the expectation that they show up to this meeting or that meeting, we need to be very judicious with that because there's always going to be an additional expense just for having somebody show up to a meeting. When you have to, excuse me, think through the process, say, is this truly necessary to have this person here just to sit there for an hour, hour and a half, that kind of thing. And if it's something they really need to be involved with from a conversation perspective, can we balance that with, telecommuting, that kind of thing? Those are things that from an organizational perspective in this interim time, instead of spending a potload of money and running up the tab with Baker Tilly, let's be cognizant of what is it we really need versus what is it we're just used to. And those are things that I think we as an organization need to really think through.
That's a good point. Thank you.
The other part is we want them to come in and do what we refer to as an attestation. They're going to meet with our current auditors and just give us a fairly in-depth financial report of things that go beyond what the auditor would say. And so kind of dovetail with that and such like that. The third thing that we really want them to do is come in and develop procedures, specific procedures that are based on best practices and generally accepted accounting standards and things like that. Those are the issues that we want to make sure, because when we hire our next finance director, we want that person to have an absolute clean slate, and this is the expectation of the board, and we'll move from that point on.
And when you say a clean slate, I would anticipate that means we're going to do in addition to the audit that we're going through right now. And when is that audit due? Is it June 1st or the end of June?
End of June.
End of June. I would feel comfortable with new finance director, this committee, and the Board of Aldermen to have a thorough review of all of our finances. And I don't know that will be done under this current process. Will that be a separate process?
It should be. I think that's part of what we want Baker Tilly to do for us.
Okay. That's just a different level or a different department within Baker Tilly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the thing about, Baker Tilly. Part of the attraction to that firm is, we'll probably have one primary interface with that organization, but they've got people with various levels of expertise, general ledger, TIFs, things like that, where people have a really good focus, and they can give us that firsthand expert recommendation on things.
And that person from Baker Tilly is anticipated to start when?
We're looking at having them, we're going to start the process on June 1, so that's next Wednesday, something like that.
Okay.
And then boots on the ground June 6th.
Very nice. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
a little.
You need to really speak
Oh,
close.
you do? Okay. A different subject, back kind of to this, I had some questions. So if the city clerk is the general accountant and I think that's great for sort of some checks and balances. That's been some questions, I think, over the year, even when I was on the board, of what does that look like and where does that go and who else sees this? What does that add to that position? So would they be involved then, would the city clerk then be involved in the budget, or would they just present the budget? But in order for us to expect for the city clerk to sort of be accountable for the city finances, I feel like that's something, and maybe this committee can be involved in changing that, obviously with that department's assistance of, here's what we do as a finance department, and here's how we can involve the city clerk to actually fulfill that role without telling the clerk he or she is completely accountable for the city finances, but all you're gonna get is the same thing this committee gets, which is the opportunity to have 48 hours to review it. So I think just something maybe to think about moving forward, and maybe that's something you're working on.
It's not been worked on. So this is the first discussion, and Jan's brought it forward. I understand what you're saying. I think there's in my role as city clerk, there's a distinct discussion about, as city clerk, I'm under the Board of Aldermen. Finance director's under the city administrator. So my responsibility, my evaluation, my things are through the Board of Aldermen, which would be something that I definitely would want my bosses to know what that entails, so that there's so it's fairly evaluated to what that means. So I think it goes all the way through, because if it's not outlined and nobody knows, that's not fair to anybody.
Right.
So.
Right, and you don't want to see a new finance director come in and you have some butting of heads because of unclear,
Yeah.
well, hey, I'm being held accountable for these finances, well, hey, I'm the one, and you end up with two departments doing this because there's not some very clear expectations of what that looks like, and then they can work together versus a power struggle. Sure. Potentially. So.
I my simplistic interpretation would be the city clerk would move forward with the help of the city administrator and understanding what the goals of the board would be. And then it's the city clerk's job to make sure those goals are met and communicate those expectations to the finance department and things like that. Not to actually do the work, not actually to sign checks or anything like that necessarily, but just be in that position to work with the city administrator and saying, okay, these things need to occur because this is the board's expectation.
And to clarify about who signs check, we should look into that also, because there should be two. In the past, there's usually two signatures, and often it is the city clerk and city administrator. So we have not practiced that, and I think that is something very important that we as a city should have. Whomever it is, we should know, and it should be directed by the board.
Agree. Again, I think this is great because it just adds another level of checks and balances. I don't want to, while you're there and you're working with this department, they know their stuff in finance. They know what they do every day. You're now getting a great grasp on that. It's a great time maybe for you and Lisa and Hillary and that department to work together and say, how can we make fair and good checks and balances with this state statute and make it very clear, like Lisa said, where it's fair for her and her department to be held accountable to that.
And while we're on that, let me address what we brought up at a few Board of Aldermen meetings ago, and that is when this board is presented the financial, what's it called, the report for the board to approve?
The quarterly reports or?
The disbursements.
Disbursements, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
So,
Yeah.
on the same subject, what I would like to see, and as I've said, I've always, for 3 years now serving the community, I've always felt uncomfortable signing off. I know that statement says we're just acknowledging receipt. But that's just that's a lot of just pages of encrypted text that's hard to it's hard to understand. It's not clear of where they went and why they went. So before the board is presented with the approval process again, maybe, and it sounds like it might be city clerk's role, but to assist the board in maybe highlighting things that are maybe just not normal course of business. Here's some things that are just anomalies, if you will, with a brief explanation of what that was for and why. And then I think with the board saying that, yes, they're acknowledging receipt of it, they're really understanding what it is, and they're acknowledging that.
And I made my attempt at this last board meeting to do some of that. The thing about it is there were a few purchases, like 8 or 9, I can't remember, where the description field on the disbursement printout was somewhat cryptic in nature. It was not very clear. There was one for DASE for IT, and there was another IT purchase that wasn't clear. And so I tried to put out, okay, like the $146,000, I think it was, dollar purchase from IT was for a security device, a network security device, that kind of thing. So I put that on the staff report. If you need more than that, I would appreciate whatever kind of direction you would want. So, those are the things that sometimes the descriptor field, even though it's short and they kind of cram that in there, it is somewhat descriptive. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, that was for, gasoline or something like that. So, but whatever the pleasure of the board
I'm sure
is.
we'll work through that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to give you kind of the outlay of the department organizational chart. Obviously, we are vacant at the director position, the assistant director. And that is not an insignificant function that we're talking about, because there's a lot of things that, I got to tell you, the folks right now are doing yeoman's work and getting a lot of stuff done. When you talk about people that are really, my vernacular, earning their keep, you got Jolynn and Tracy and Sunday and Marcia, all those folks and Ryan really getting after it, because there's so much to do because they're down 2 people. So hats off to them. They've done a great job. Everybody's pitched in and worked together through this process. They've nursemaided me, whenever it comes to, hey, why are you doing this? They explain it to me, that kind of thing. So I very much appreciate it. On the far left side, obviously, you see the assistant director position is vacant. And then we've got Tracy Henderson. That's not to say that this is a direct report structure. Tracy did report to the assistant director, but Teresa doesn't necessarily report to Tracy, that kind of thing. Ryan in purchasing, he's a purchasing agent. He's pretty much on his own. And then you got Matthew Henry. He is the supervisor over the licensing folks. And then you got Jolynn over there, all by her little lonesome, and Sunday. And then you've got Marcia. Marcia is covers a lot of territory. She's doing payroll. She's doing grants, the whole supervision of utilities, billing, and things like that as well. And this.
Excuse me, Jim.
Yeah.
Before you move on, I just wanted to publicly make it clear that I don't think it's a secret over the past 3 years. I have shared frustration with our finance side, and I really appreciate everybody that works in that department. And so things that I have said or done or put in print in the past, addressing, I'd like to see more accountability, more transparency, and the questions that I was raising for the past 3 years, they were really directed at our finance director. I was frustrated with not being able to get information that I was asking for, And so my frustrations were really bottled up to our finance director, and it had absolutely no reflect at all of those that worked in that department. In hindsight, I could see some of my statements sounding like I'm talking about the finance department, when in fact it was really directed to the finance director. So I just wanted to be clear that if I've said or done anything that was offensive, and I could see how some of it could have been for the department itself, I want to publicly apologize for that and just make it clear that my frustrations were directed to the director. Thank you.
Yeah, the thing, I kind of echo that, somewhat of that same response with respect to how the staff there has been very flexible with respect to, change is tough. And the one, it's like what the cops tell me, what they hate more than anything is change. And what they hate next is the way things are now. And so, so it's one of those where it's, these guys, they've really come on board. You can see them kind of blossom in a little bit of the independence and the independent thought processes and making suggestions, recommendations, and things like that that I like to see personally. That's I think we've got a bunch of folks here that have a ton of capability.
You bet.
Wanted to talk a little bit about what we've got here with respect to the different responsibilities for the department. We do payroll, grants, and you can read all those. There is a lot of stuff. Obviously, there are more things there that they do than staff. So people are taking on multiple topics, multiple items, and being responsible for it, and they're doing a really good job. I want to kind of point out, the assistant finance director, just going through the different roles of the department. That historically we've gone through, and this person has covered, things like fixed assets, financial reporting, supervision of other employees, while acting as a backup to the finance director. Those are the kinds of things that we want to be able to understand. Where could this role better be served, if there's any changes at all with this new, with Baker Tilly coming in and giving us advice? How do we want to lay this department out? They will look and evaluate staff and see what the areas of expertise are, what the areas of the workload and things like that. As part of our staffing study, they will be able to contribute significantly to that.
Jan, I have a question.
Sure.
Will they also be evaluating whether the finance department is adequately staffed to, you go back to the previous page and you look at all the duties that they perform, and you say, is that an overload? Would they make a recommendation that there needs to be additional staff added
Absolutely.
or whatever in this area with this expertise?
That's part of, like I said, I wanted to be able to combine that information with the overall staffing study we're doing for the city. In this organization, and I'll get into the HR side just a touch here, but in this organization, we have confused over the years the difference between headcount and full-time equivalency, FTE. We'll say essentially, okay, we've got one person who's in charge of TIFs and that kind of thing. And in reality, if it takes that person 60 hours a week to do that job, or let's say, keep it simpler, 50 hours a week to do that job, that's not one FTE, that's 1.25 FTE. So, and this is really prevalent like in the police department and things like that, where you've got different sectors of town. Are we staffed appropriately? Are we getting various areas? Are we getting the coverage we really need based on national standards and things like that? I think the chief has already gone through a lot of that legwork to figure that out, and he's doing the best he can. But we have certain limitations, and we need to, as a board, be able to list that out so you can make some good, sound decisions, or so that the board can make good, sound decisions on staffing.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to go down the list and look at the different things. So if you've got any ideas or questions or things like that, you can contact me or those people individually. Tracy Henderson, she handles the convention center, TIF monthly billing, and all that fun stuff. She's also somebody that applies project numbers to things that we do and various things, and keeps track of that so that whenever we spend money, that we've got a means to account for different things across the board. And so she's an integral part of that. And then the last part on there, she handles the fleet leasing program through Enterprise, which based on everything I've been told, I don't have a city vehicle, so I don't know. But it's one of those where based on everything I've been told, it works pretty well.
Yeah, you're not getting a vehicle either. So.
Dang it. I just want a fire engine.
Let's just clear it up.
We can get you one of those little bitty smart cars. You 6'5", you'll fit in it perfectly.
That'd look good.
Jan,
Yeah.
although, I mean, Betsy's been here before, I've been here for a while, of course. I just think that like when we get our new members on this finance committee, I think it'd be great, like if Tracy and all the other staff, Jolynn, all of them could just like be introduced so
Okay.
that we know who, I mean, so that they know who that person is.
Okay.
It's not just a name, so they can put a face to it. I think that's important that everyone here understands who they are, so that we know them and they know us. And so I just think it would be good if we could do that.
I kind of like the idea of making them stand up and having a round of applause. or something
Standing
like
up
that.
and getting applause, I think they deserve, so.
All right, and Tracy's behind the monitor there, slinking down, getting out of the way. Teresa Smith, is she in here? I don't see her. Teresa handles accounts payable, things like that. Anytime we've got DPRs that we send out for payments, she handles all that. She's the one that actually puts the payables report together so that the board can then approve that. Ryan, again, whenever when we first made this transition, I asked the staff to give me a kind of a background of what they actually do, and Ryan listed his stuff. And there's a lot there, you know. He does a lot of the RFP, or does all the RFPs and RFQs. But there's a lot of stuff involved with that because you have to send that information out. You have to post the legal postings of it. You put it out on different websites and things like that. And then you have to handle, vendor inquiries. Hey, what about this? What about that? And then he has to parse that out to different departments and then respond back to the vendors. And like I said, it's a ton of work. And he's keeping us on the straight and narrow with that. And one of the last things that we did 2 board meetings ago was the surplus redistribution and disposal. Ryan handles that as well. So if we've got old mowers and things like that, he'll list it out on Purple Wave and put it up for sale and things like that. And we actually generate a little revenue off of that, or recoup a little revenue off of that. Matthew Henry. Matthew, a very skilled banjo player. He is, back several months ago, a couple of years ago, I'd be working late, I'd come downstairs, and he's still in the office there, and, well, there he is.
Jen, would you start at the beginning and catch Cody out?
Yeah.
I have a thing.
But anyhow, Matthew he's responsible.
I feel your pain. I'm married to a banjo player, so anyway.
Well, actually, he's quite good.
They all are.
I mean, it's like he pulled it up and started playing like, holy cow. I mean, I hardly play a radio. Matthew is business licensing, liquor licensing, things like that. He issues citations. He will report to the board every now and then on liquor violations and things like that. So, and one of the nicest people you'll ever want to meet. Jason Jones. Jason here? Nope. Jason, he works in the business licensing and contractor licensing. The one thing that that Jason pointed out was renewal of about 2,500 licenses annually, things like that. There's a lot of work to do. And the one thing I found out is some of that, whenever you go through that, there's a requirement for actual paper copies of things and actual filing of things. You talk about work, that's real work, keeping track of that stuff. And again, he does a lot of the various things around the department, water, sewer, customer service payments, and things like that. And Tiffany is kind of in the same ballpark, if you will, and she, again, echoed the 2,500 different businesses that they do renewals on and such. So those folks are constantly busy. They're the ones, whenever you come into the finance department, they're right there off to your left as you walk through that door. Jolynn. Enough said. Jolynn, she's been invaluable through this whole process. Jolynn does, she nursemaided me through doing all the transfers and things like that. She showed me how. She didn't get impatient when I asked her 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times to show me again, that kind of thing. She's just been easy to work with, very patient with me, but she does a really good job. You know, you ask her to do something, she responds quickly. There was a TIF meeting yesterday that fell off my radar, and they needed the financial, or SID meeting, I'm sorry, that fell off my radar. And they needed the financials, and I, called Jolynn up, and she turned those around in 5 minutes. And so it was, she's one person you can always depend on. Sunday in here? Oh, there she is. Honestly, I have to go off this list of the things she does. She's real quiet. She used to do accounts payable and things like that, and she would occasionally laugh at some of my emails that I'd send her, but beyond that, she manages the receivables and the year-end reconciliations and the general ledger, and she does work on different things. So based on my understanding, one of the things that's going to be her biggest tasks is putting together the budget books and things like that. So. And Marcia, she works a lot with human resources. We feed her data or information and things like that, and she acts on that. Like if I have to involuntarily terminate an employee, state statute requires that they be paid up to their last day of work on that last day. And so when that happens, I'm able to contact Marcia. She turns those around in just minutes. So those are the kinds of things that she does. I mean, she's willing and ready to drop whatever needs to be dropped to be able to go in and fix things and things like that. She handles all the payroll, makes sure that all the, the accounts, the ACHs are all done correctly and things. There's just a lot of stuff going on with payroll, and she does a really good job. She also she's part of the loggers administration. She interfaces with them, with various employees, like as an example, if you're out of work for one day because of a work comp issue, then you do not get loggers accrual for that particular month. That's just their rule. Well, she has to manage all that, and we have occasions where, employees will get hurt. They'll be hurt for a week or something like that. Well, she has to keep track of that and be on top of that. She's also responsible for utilities, supervising that. And then she has taken on a lead role with respect to our grants now. That's been something that's been just in the last couple of months. So, and she's all in. Philip Parsons, he stays back in his office all the time, and I hardly ever see him. He kind of manages the utilities billing and the overall accounting of it, and handles things like, just general office things. Julie Anderson, I don't see her. She is, she's part of that whole utilities billing and such. She prints monthly bills, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7,000 of them, and getting those out to customers and things like that. So she's one of those people that she's always busy, and when you walk by, she smiles. Can't ask for a whole lot more than that. And Amanda is, I believe she's like the newest to the department. She's the one, whenever you're walking in the front door, she's right there. And she's the one who will push the button and let you in most of the time, things like that. She fills in a lot of different areas under the utilities billing side of things. And that's it.
So does anybody on the committee have any questions for Jan?
I don't have a question, but, again, I wish the new folks could be here to have gone through this, because I think it's very helpful understanding everybody's roles. And I'd just like to take a moment and recognize the finance department for what a great job that they've done. And so thank you. Your professionalism, your dedication, and we appreciate you.
And I will second that.
I'll third that, and then, boy, they sure have quite a list of responsibilities, and so it's great that this will be included in the staffing study. And it seems like there's some good cross-training that has probably taken place in that department, because whenever, any time that I've gone up to the window or talked to anyone, I get to see different faces, and they're all familiar with processes, so they provide good customer service.
Yeah.
You guys do a great job.
They really do. My experience recently has been with, I think Julie is cross-training with Marcia on payroll and things like that. Because when you're in payroll, it's like, okay, you kind of got to determine when you're going to take vacations or time off or things like that, because if you get paid every 2 weeks, then you know the schedule you really need to keep. And that's not always feasible. So you need somebody to back up and help you out.
So I've been here before. I've been on the Board of Aldermen before. Worked a lot with several of these guys in the finance department. The one thing that I would like to say, a little bit similar to what Larry said, this department, the people I worked with were always, I'm an in-the-weeds person, so I like to dig in. I want to know where the money's going, how it's being spent, what's happening with it. They were always quick to answer questions that they could. With a smile would say, I'm not sure, but I'll get back to you on that. I feel like, in hindsight, there were times that they were sort of kept in their lane and in their silo, and I'm excited to see where they can spread their wings and fly now, because there's so much talent, so much information that maybe they didn't get because that wasn't their job. And giving that opportunity, I think the sky's the limit with the ideas they're going to come up with, the things that they know, the processes that they can implement without any questions from the board or this committee. So I was never picking either on the department. Being an in-the-weeds person, for me, obviously, my big thing was the safety sales tax. Because I put my name on that to the community, that it would only be spent on new expenses. I went to the chamber, got them to support it. I went to businesses, I went to communities. So it was important to me that it was being spent the right way. That was never a reflection on the department in any way, shape, or form. It was because I had helped kind of be the face of it as an alderman at the time. Community members would ask me questions, I couldn't answer them. I would try to get answers by the director of finance, not the department, and I think several times maybe my comments were, the finance department won't give me this information. The finance department, and so like Larry, in hindsight, you look at that, and I hope anyone that I offended, Jolynn or any of them, they were always wonderful, helpful, answered questions, never negative about anything. So I want to apologize if I ever offended any of them, and I hope they know my heart, that it wasn't about pointing fingers, causing problems. It was just getting answers for our community. End of story, bottom line, no personal vendettas, no, for what? It was about getting answers for our community. That's all I've ever wanted. That's all I want to do here, is make sure that if somebody has a question, I'll get you that, and you get it. So thank you to the department. Thank you to you, Jan, for stepping up, doing multiple roles. These guys are doing that. Lisa's doing that. A lot of people right now are doing multiple roles, and y'all are doing a great job. So thanks.
Well, kind of putting on the HR hat again, a little bit to dovetail on the department itself. One of the things that I've really am focused on as an organization is succession planning. You know, ideally, what I'd like to be able to do is do 75, 80% of whatever director positions open up. I'd like to be able to fill those internally. That's where that would be my ultimate goal. And so I want to develop the processes and the infrastructure so that we can keep track of that kind of stuff, so that we can do those things.
Yeah, I support that idea a lot. So, anybody else? You want to move on to the next
Okay.
item?
All right. This is the recommendation for the expenditures for disbursements. You know, you can see those. I lost track where I was. Anyhow, you can look at some of those that we have. If you've got questions on any of those, I've got plenty of folks here to help answer some of those questions if I can't answer them.
Jan, would it be possible on security bank cards to, I don't think anybody wants to look through 20 pages of expenses, but break it out by department where this committee doesn't need to get in the weeds necessarily, but even for the board, they can see by department. So if you can follow trends, right? So you can see, well, the fire department usually uses $10,000 a month on their P cards, and all of a sudden you see this spike of the fire department used $150,000. That might prompt someone to say, could we get a little more information of why this trend suddenly changed? If that's a ton of work, then obviously it's not going to make sense. But if it's as easy as a spreadsheet,
Well, I'm going to speak out of school a little bit because I don't deal with that directly at this point. I used to, back 9 years ago. And it was fairly simple at that point. You know, it was the same interface type thing to be able to download that stuff, sort it by department and things like that. It shouldn't be a problem. But to your point, you know, no telling how many pages it would be, you know, that kind of thing. We could, you know, I was able to download it and then do, you know, total it by department, or I could display it back then however we wanted. So I'm assuming nothing's changed to that extent.
And again, if that's not something that's important to the aldermen that serve here, then it's probably not something this committee needs. I mean, I think that's probably a board decision of whether that's important.
Okay.
Do we need a motion to approve these, Lisa?
Do you usually do a motion? Yes.
Can we do them both at the same time, March and April? So I'll entertain a motion to accept the March and April, what are we calling this? AP checks? Disbursements?
Over 15,000.
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
What Betsy just commented on, I feel that it would be a good idea, but I can't make the decision for the board, but maybe to bring that up. I think it would be a good idea if we could see by department, if it's not too difficult to do, because that would give us a better idea than just looking at one figure with PCAR. So I think that would be a great tool.
Yeah, because whenever you're looking at that expenditure amount, security bank card, $252,841.16. That's a chunk of money.
Yeah.
So what's that going to? It shouldn't be that hard. I'll make sure I let everybody know if it becomes a challenge, that kind of thing. But I don't see it as being a big challenge.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is the right time, but I know, what I'd like to hear also is, and not today, but just put on everybody's radar, city has considered upgrading our finance software for quite a while. I also understand that's a pretty hefty number.
Sure.
So maybe in the near future, this committee could hear the benefits of maybe the software we've looked at, the one that is narrowed down to, the benefits it provides. I would have to believe that we would have much more efficiencies with our finance department with the software that was created within the last 20 years.
Millennium.
I don't know how old our current one is, but I know it just creates a lot of limitations of what it can and cannot do.
Yeah, I think the first iteration was scribed in tablets, just saying. It's old.
Yeah.
The one thing, there's lots of different things that we can do in that respect. We can look at the ERP, and there's some low-hanging fruit that I think Marcia would truly appreciate, and that is the timekeeping system. Our current methodology requires that all the departments allocate one resource for 1 to 2 days every 2 weeks, compiling all this information. And it is extremely labor-intensive to the point it's silly. There's different timekeeping systems that we can employ that would have geofencing or things like that, where if you clock in, you're just walking past a arbitrary line that somebody's installed. You walk past that line, you're clocked in, and it feeds it to a spreadsheet of some kind, and it dumps it over to payroll, and it alleviates probably who knows how many hours a month of labor.
Yeah. Is that the end of your reports?
There are other reports somewhere.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, we've got these.
Yeah.
I'm not going to belabor these very much. We're 4 months in. The reporting is 4 months into the new year. I will just say, based on the numbers I interpret, things are looking pretty good for this year so far, as it sits. year over date is good. Last year was pretty good, and so this year's doing even, it looks like to be a little bit better.
Just one caution I want to put on that is, we all know that 2021 was a record-setting year. I mean, if you look across 2021, there was 13.8 million. The year before was 10 million. The year before that was 11.7. So the 13.8 really stands out. But if you look at the first 4 months of this year, compared to 21, our record year, 2021 really didn't kick into gear, showing these phenomenal numbers until we got into, well, you can see May was 66%, June, July were 140-something%. So I just wanted to caution that when you look at that at 10,000 feet, it says we're 26% year-to-date over our record-setting year. However, our big months are still to come.
Right. And 2021 being a bit of a, like I consider it like a rebound year, if you will. And, you know, that rebound may be continuing into this year, so it could plateau and trail off. We, you know, again, it's just speculative at this point.
Yeah, so I would just ask, maybe just add one more thing to our finance department. If they can go ahead and end the year at 37.8% above 21, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, I can
You guys
put
can do
whatever
that?
number I want. Just a number.
Okay.
Okay. That's the 1% sales tax. The next one is transportation. Again, it's kind of following a bit of the same trends.
Yeah, and I just want everybody to look at the transportation, because when we go to the safety sales tax, I know that's an issue that is near and dear to Dick Gass's heart, that these stay pretty much in alignment, and I think they have. Year to date, we're at 2.1 million, and then when we get to is the public safety next? Yeah. So they're at 2,091,000. So that's, just so those are tracking very
Right.
closely.
Tourism. It's chugging along. Trends are looking good as well. That's a break.
So, yeah, stay on that just for a second. So in March of 21, really was a down year because of COVID. But boy, I sure like seeing those theater numbers, the increase that they've had. The increase over 21 year to date, and I know it's only the first 3 months, is at 60%. I don't anticipate that continuing at that number, but it's sure good to see that the revenues they're bringing in is significantly higher. Next one, please. This is the rolling 12 months.
Yeah. And you can see 21 was significantly better than 20. 20 was not the best year. This is sales tax not restricted to TIF payments. So all in all, like I said, the trends are in the positive direction. you know, again, if you, you know, my intention for this was not to dig into the detail on a month-by-month basis. You guys can read that and understand it. It's pretty straightforward information. Is that it? And we have, man, I gotta get my eyes checked. Okay. And tourism again.
So, reading the total over the last few years, starting in 19 was roughly 13 million. 20 was our down year at 8.6 million. 21, huge number, 16.8 million. And so this year, for 2022, we have budgeted 13 million, which is obviously it's an increase over 19. Actually, it's almost the same as our 2019 number. So this would say that our budget, even though we had that anomaly year of 20 and 21, so we're in, as a city, what we're anticipating for tourism tax is roughly the same amount we received in 19.
Yeah. Slightly higher, but yeah, essentially the same. Those are the things that whenever it comes to forecasting, you know, it's good to have a good understanding of what, you know, and I think this committee could help with that. Whenever it comes to the budget time and saying, okay, does this make sense from that perspective? Because the last thing you want to do is have an arbitrary number in there and somebody just say, oh, well, I think it's going to be this. I think a community effort in coming up with, well, I see this trend or I see that trend, and coming up with that revenue forecast is going to be essential from an organizational perspective, because that sets the bar of what expenditures can be.
Jan, do you guys have does the city have a specific process in place? Because there really wasn't before, and it came up a couple times at capital improvements. So when you have a year that you have a big increase like this in numbers from what the budget was, there was discussion at one point about how that's handled, how the decision is made, who makes the decision of when to adjust the budget. Is there a way to have sort of a list of capital projects that got turned down during the budget process because it didn't appear the money was going to be there? And so there was some priorities put to those that could be brought back to the board to say, here's numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 based on the board's recommendation that didn't make the cut for capital improvements. Now we're up, this is tourism tax, but we're up 38% year to date. We don't want to spend all of that money, but we feel comfortable that we could end the year at least 15% up, so we have 18% we can spend. Boom, there's a process, there's a list during the budgeting process that says here's the capital things that increased revenue could be spent on if we have an up year. Is that process still there? Do you know?
Well, firsthand, I can't say definitively that it's there. I think in theory it's there, but I've not seen it particularly work in that respect. But that being said, you need to be able to do it in both directions. You know, if revenues are short, hey, we need to make some adjustments here. That's the one thing we've done historically is we've been relatively siloed in the whole budgeting and expense progression realm, if you will. You know, essentially what happens from the budgeting process, we would meet with the finance director and the city administrator and come up with our budgets, and we'd say this is what we need, and then we would find out later whether or not we got it, that kind of thing. Ideally, Lisa has done an outstanding job of pulling all the directors together. I've asked this from every city administrator I've worked for, is can we get all directors around the table and talk budgets at that point so that we understand what each department's needs are and things like that. And we can do a little bit of our own prioritization in that respect. Those are things that, you know, it's like whenever we go through a process of doing this, we understand, like if we've got a clear methodology for forecasting revenues, and let's say we're coming up ahead, and Ted needs, you know, another vehicle for the fire department, or Jeff needs another vehicle for police. That, you know, we look at that concertedly, and we can sit around the table and say, you know, you've been wanting that for a long time. Let's focus on you getting that. And you know, I may need my, you know, whatever, my new muffler on my truck or something like that. And it's one of those things that's like, that's a low priority. Let's let Jeff have his new vehicle. Okay, we work through it together, and it's not siloed in that respect.
I think that's great.
Yeah. I know one process that I've used over the years is when I look at this chart for an example, if we could just add a column in for each year of what the budget was compared to what the actuals were, and then look at, because right now we have actuals on there, if we could see what the budget number started out to be and how we ended, and then use a range of time to come up with some reasonable assumptions.
Right.
Because obviously, I mean, the two best examples are on the board, right? 20 and 21.
Right.
But using a time frame of averages of here's what we anticipated, things happen, and here's where we ended, both up and down, to give us more of a comfort of as we project forward.
Sure, in that respect, you'd be able to see, get a glimpse of what your cash flows are going to look like as well. So you can say, well, maybe my cash flow is a little light in the first quarter, so then maybe I have to wait until April or May to buy this.
That's right.
Okay, these are the financials that we have. I will presume that you have read through these or can read through these. It appears that, you know, from an expenditure and revenue perspective, that we're pretty well on track. We have a couple of areas that are seasonal, if you will, in nature from an expenditure perspective. You know, like you'll have, you know, one payment in March and another payment in November. Well, it makes the year-to-date well over 50% by May, that kind of thing. Right. So there's going to be anomalies in there that are like that. But at the end of the year, we should end up at 100% on all of these different areas, or close to 100%. Are there any questions or anything you've got for any of these financials? And again, if anybody is watching on TV and they want this, these financials are out on our website. You can get them, access them that way.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Oh, and to your point earlier, Mayor, when it comes to financials and things like that and the ERP, in my conversation with Baker Tilly, they have add-ons that we could add on to our financial system, whatever it is, that would enable us to export data out to our website and fairly seamlessly in nature, that makes searching simple and easy. So that if you've got specific expenditures you want to look for, you can go find them.
Yeah, and I know our current board would be all in favor of that, knowing of the full transparency and all that we'd like to share to the public, and the easier it is for them to access, the better.
Yes. That's great.
Okay, public safety. Tracking along. It's interesting on the differentiations between academia accounting and municipal accounting. You know, back in my days, you know, I could charge indirect costs to human resources, to like adult education fund and things like that, you know, whereas like with public safety, it's strictly for what's within public safety. You know, if I had to hire somebody for a public safety position in the academic world, I would be able to transfer indirect costs over to that. Here, we're fairly discreet. Any questions on any of these so far? I mean, it's not like watching paint dry sometimes to watch, to go through financials. And as well, you know, if you've got these pulled up on your iPads or anything, you can ask any questions you want. And if you do ask questions, some of the answers I'm going to probably give you is, I don't know, I'll have to find out. The one thing that I wanted to also point out, like when we get to the bottom of this transportation fund, there'll probably be the reserve balance at the bottom. So just to make sure that you understand those balances are there as well. Like the other night, with the board meeting, we did an emergency purchase to fix Gretna Road, and we did a transfer out of the tourism over to Keith's area so that he can then fix Gretna, and it was about $500,000. And it left us, we had a $16.6 million cash balance, I shouldn't say cash balance there, and it whittled it down to about $500,000.
Yep. Yep.
And when it comes to those reserve amounts, after conversations with you earlier, Mayor, the one thing I want to make sure that we work on is getting you that information that you were asking with respect to how are those funds invested and where are they at, how are they swept in and out, and that kind of whole process, so that you have a clear understanding of that.
Yeah, that's it. The investment accounts, how many accounts we have, how those are, I'm sure there's going to be short-term, basically cash or cash equivalent, and then some longer terms.
Right.
But that's one area that I've asked a few times is for this committee and the board to have an overview of everything relating to our investment accounts. Here's how much is in there. Here's how many accounts we use. Here's how it's swept in or swept out. What if any there's restrictions. Just even a basic understanding of our investment accounts.
Sure. I'll work with Joe Lynn on that, and we'll have that for you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any questions on the water, sewer, anything? Those are, hi, Kendall. Oh, Aaron's here. There's a lot of financials here to look at. Do we have a consolidated financial report at all? Well, I was just, in general term, as consolidated as you could be. I mean, I don't know.
Jan, if you wouldn't mind sharing the response for those that are listening.
That we don't currently have because, Jolene's telling me that we have to treat them all separately, that respect. So, but that's something that, I think what I'd like to see personally is just a simple one pager of, what the overall condition looks like and what trends are and things like that to make it somewhat simple. It would be very high level, very superficial, wouldn't give you a ton of information, but it'd just give you a snapshot of the overall view. It'll be difficult to put together and get all the information you'd want, but something simple.
Would you hold on that one? Which fund is this? Okay, so if you would scroll down. Okay, under the fund balance. This amount includes the value of our capital. So this isn't cash. When we say reserved fund balance, that figure includes all of our water lines, sewer lines, all of our capital that we own.
It's kind of the replacement of what an owner's equity would be. So on a proprietary.
I'm sorry, Jolyn.
Yeah, why don't
Yes,
you come on
please.
up?
Yes, please. Come on up. How about a drum roll? Standing ovation. No.
This is a proprietary fund, so it, okay.
So they
I'm
can
not
hear.
as tall as, getting bigger heels. A proprietary fund is like a business. We have to treat it like a business, so that's the water and sewer funds combined, including their capital, is what you're looking at. So that includes the assets, and the fund balance on this is like an owner's equity sheet in a business type setting. So that's, your assets minus your liabilities equals fund balance kind of thing.
Would it be reasonable to ask maybe for a second asterisk and just to break that out of this dollar amount, so much is capital and so much is,
Well, at the top of this is the cash, and obviously you have to take out like the current liabilities out of there, and then that would be kind of what your cash almost reserves are.
okay, so let's, if we don't mind, just let's look at that real quick. Okay, so.
Oh, okay, so this is, I'm sorry, this is your financials. That would be on the balance sheet side. And that is in the packet as well. Now, on the balance sheet side, we don't have one that combines. This is funds 620, 145, and 146, which is water and sewer capital, and water and sewer small capital. So it would just be a matter of combining those funds on the balance sheet and looking at the current liabilities and subtracting those out.
And obviously, the deposits need to be subtracted out of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I think the next report has what you're looking for. It shows what's in the investment accounts, what cash is on hand. It's the cash reconciliation and balance sheet.
Yeah, I was just, as we go through each separate fund, when it shows reserve balance, I was just wanting to
Clarify, we didn't have that much cash
yeah,
in
it's
the
not,
bank.
yeah, it's not we have that much cash sitting there. I know that there's capital assets. So our general fund has 9.8 million. Okay, scroll, in fact, we can zoom out just a little bit, I think.
So there's your BOK investment account, 39.5
Yeah.
million. That should be combined reserves for all accounts, is that correct? That are listed,
Yeah.
that are listed. So some of that is untouchable, so to speak. It's required to be there for TIFs and bond, different, okay. That's just for clarification, that we don't have 39 million. We can just start
Right,
spending
check.
for those that might not know.
Okay, thank you.
And here's the 16.6 million from tourism. That will be reduced a little bit after we make those payments.
Okay.
You know, obviously, we're going through the perfunctory process of showing you all of these reports. If this committee would like a better way to do this, you know, I'm here at your pleasure, so you tell me how you'd like it. Again, my premise is you've read them, you've looked at them, and if you've got questions, you'll ask. You know, we can not waste, or not waste, but
Yeah.
not take the time to go through all of these, or we can go through them, whatever your pleasure is.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the committee's desire is. I don't know that there's a value of just scrolling through each of these. We were provided these before the meeting and had an opportunity to review them and ask any questions. So unless the committee feels otherwise, I don't see the value of scrolling through. If
Okay.
the committee had questions, does the committee agree with that, or would you find value in scrolling through these?
I've already looked at this
Yeah.
when I got the agenda.
So,
I would recommend maybe even moving forward for future meetings, Jan, is your department highlight any things that sort of stand out, and I think it's kind of our job as a committee to review them in advance, and
Okay.
if we have questions, we write them down, we can ask. You can have them available, but if there's something specific you think this committee needs to know, you point it out, and
Okay.
otherwise we move on down the road.
How about we provide the reports as part of the staff report, and then any anomalies or spurious areas, that I put that in the staff report.
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay.
Because again, the public has access to this also.
Exactly. Okay. And then the next piece beyond that is the the reports. And we've already kind of talked about what I was going to talk about with the respect of Baker Tilly, having them come in and that kind of thing. If there's any other questions around Baker Tilly and that whole process that we've got planned, we can cover that at this point, or we can move on to adjourn. It's your call.
Any committee members have any questions or comments for Jan? No? No?
Great job filling in, Jan, and kind of,
Yeah.
as multiple people in the city right now fill in multiple roles, and I'm sure the finance department's keeping you in line.
Yeah, I don't see Kimberly very often these days.
Well, I would like to just repeat myself briefly about how much I appreciate those that are in the finance department and all the things they do. I appreciate Pam's comment that when we do the staffing study, there very well may be one person in charge of 50, 60 hours worth of work, and just have the opportunity to review that.
Sure.
Hearing no other questions, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?